So I know this is kind of hard to believe, but there once was a time long ago where you could hang out with your friends in person. I know it's crazy, like not even over Zoom, not over Google Hangouts, not FaceTime, but you could hang out with your friends in person. And it's crazy, and I know it's hard for you to imagine it. This time actually existed. And there's so much I want to do with those friends right now, and I'm sure that you relate to it. Like what I wouldn't give to go and play some basketball. That would just be fantastic. I want so dang bad. I would love to get together with some friends and play some board games in person. That'd be pretty wild, I'm sure. I mean, heck, I wouldn't even mind playing Smash Bros with you guys watching this. Even though I know that you would absolutely destroy me and three stock me, and it wouldn't even be fun. It'd be worth it just to hang out with some people in person. But here's the thing about hanging out with friends. It can be so difficult to decide what you want to do sometimes. Like it can be almost impossible. I have one memory in particular of a time like this where, if you remember Garrett, he was a worship leader and a youth leader at Crossroads. We were hanging out with him, and I think my two roommates now, Clay and Gabe. It was before Clay was living with us though, because this was a while ago, and we could not decide what to do at all. We kept arguing about it. Everyone had like, I think it was more like there are sometimes there are times when everyone has something they want to do. Other times there are times when no one has anything that they want to do, and I think it was one of those times. No one had any ideas, and so we couldn't decide. Something would get suggested, and someone would shoot it down, sort of thing. Until eventually, Gabe threw out the idea. I think he was like, "Why don't we just all read a book?" And Garrett like latched onto that. He was like, "Yes, that is what we're doing." And so like books were distributed to everyone from my bookshelf. I think maybe Colton was there. Everyone got a book, and we just laid around like I was laying on the ground, and we all just read books because we couldn't decide what to do. I even remember what book I read. I read "We Stand on Guard" by Brian K. Vaughan, and we all just sat around and read. Kind of like a weird scenario. I remember there was another time. I think I was coaching a basketball game or something, and I knew that Gabe and Clay and Colton were all hanging out without me. I was going to join them after. I was coming home late for some reason. And I got home, and they had purchased this whiteboard that's right here. They had purchased that, and they had listed like 10 things that we could do. And then they had built, and I don't have this anymore because it was destroyed during our move, but they had built this wheel that they called Klothos, which is Greek for luck, I think. It was called the Wheel of Klothos, so the Wheel of Luck, or Chance, I think. And you would spin it, and it would land on a number that corresponded with something on the whiteboard, and that was what they would do, because they could not decide what to do. There were just too many options, and no one wanted to have an opinion, so they left it up to chance, and they spun the wheel, and that would determine what we would do. Um, why do I tell you this? Why do I share these stories with you, other than the fact that they are funny? Um, I share this with you because making decisions is pretty hard. I think now more than ever, you and I, like growing up in the age that we do, I think decisions are even more difficult. The pressure is on. And the reason that the pressure is on is because, and you probably hear this all the time as young people, the decisions that we make now determine the stories that we'll tell later. And yeah, like the decisions that we made back, in the last couple of years on when we're hanging out, like those make funny stories to tell. But I mean, like the decisions that we make now will determine that the life stories that we're going to tell as well. Um, the decision of who my friends are has determined the story that I get to tell one day to my kids about my life. Even like the decision to move into that little apartment with Gabe has determined a lot about my life as well, and has determined my life story. So if decisions are so important, I think the question that we have to ask is, how do we know if we're making the right decisions? How do we know that? How do we know if we are in God's perfect will? And that can be kind of scary to think about. That can be a little bit frightening, and that can move us, I think, to just absolute indecision. I think that's almost as dangerous as bad decisions, I think, just never making a decision at all. So how do we know if we're in God's perfect will? What if we ask him and he doesn't answer us? It seems like everybody else is doing great. Do you ever feel that way? It seems like everyone on Instagram and Snapchat, they're awesome. They're doing fine. And meanwhile, me, I'm barely keeping my head above water. I don't have everything together at all. I can just imagine right now, like this person has posted on social media that they are learning Japanese during the virus, or they've posted all these selfies where they've gone hiking, and it seems like they've got the perfect dog, or they've got the perfect girlfriend, or the perfect boyfriend. They've got the perfect body, and if things are so good for them, and I don't feel like they are for me, am I in God's will? Am I really living out God's plan for me? Is God's plan for me to not have the same good life that they have? And here's what I want you to know. I want you to know a couple of things before we dive into knowing if we're in God's will. I want you to know this first. Perfection is an illusion. It is totally an illusion. I hope that you are not comparing your real life against someone else's life on Instagram or Snapchat or whatever TikTok is. I hope that you're not comparing your life to that, because that is like comparing the behind the scenes of a movie to the movie that you see in theaters. And those are not the same thing, right? So I hope you know that this illusion of perfection and this perfect life that someone might be living, it's just an illusion. It's not perfection. No one's life is perfect, okay? So I hope you know that first. There's no comparison. And chasing God's will for your life will not look perfect. That's not what it's going to look like. We are imperfect people who have been given choices by God, and sometimes we're going to make the right one, and sometimes we won't. And that's a part of sanctification and becoming more like God. So how do we make that right choice? And how do we know that we're making the right choice? Well, that's where discernment comes in, and that's what we're going to talk about tonight. Last week we talked about this. We talked about who before do in this series that we're in called To Be Determined, and how our lives are to be determined. And it was my mom sharing, and she shared that before you make the right decision, before you do the right do, you have to know the right who. And there's kind of two who's in there. And I know this sounds silly when I'm saying it out loud, but there's the who of God. You need to know who he is before you can live in his will. And then second is you need to know who God has made you to be, and you need to find your identity in him. And after you have done that, then God will give you the right what. Okay? Then he will begin to lead you in this right direction. Now tonight we're going to talk about something a little bit different. We're going to talk about discernment and knowing if we're in that right direction that God has given us. You might remember in March we did a series called A Word to the Wise. It's all about wisdom, and it's kind of funny that and it was about Proverbs, and now we're doing a series on Sundays where we find ourselves in Proverbs. But the first week of March, I spoke to you about a man named Solomon who wrote most of the Proverbs that you find in the Bible, and he was given an offer from God when he ascended to the throne of Israel. He was given this offer by God where God said, "You can have whatever you ask for. So what will it be?" And Solomon doesn't choose more power or a bigger kingdom. He doesn't choose riches or anything like that. Solomon decides that he wants wisdom from God. And this is actually something that Solomon says about wisdom in Proverbs. And I want you to keep this verse in mind. Proverbs 4:7 says this: "Getting wisdom is the wisest thing that you can do. And whatever else you do, develop good judgment." So right there, we see that Solomon is already emphasizing that this wisdom is an important thing. So what are you going to do with this free will that's been given to you by God? Hopefully you will seek wisdom. And that can be a challenging thing, this pursuit of wisdom and this pursuit of God's will. In fact, there's this famous English preacher from the 19th century named Charles Spurgeon, and this is what he says about discernment and wisdom. He says, "Discernment is not knowing the difference between right and wrong. It is knowing the difference between right and almost right." Many times in your life, there are going to be many things that seem like they could be the right decision, that seem like they could be the right path or the right choice. And that means that we're really going to need wisdom. In fact, this is our main thing for tonight. Not every good thing is a God thing. Not every good thing is a God thing. There will be numerous things that seem like they might be good. That doesn't mean that they've been given to us by God. Something really big that Pastor Rob likes to say is not every promotion's from God. And that's kind of hard for us to wrap our heads around because we're often pursuing promotions and we see that as a blessing, but it might not always be what God's will is for you. And so if discernment is so difficult and wisdom is tough to come by, and some good things might not be the right things, that makes decision making sound so hard, and it makes it seem like the best thing to do would just be to not make a decision at all, because then you can't make the wrong one. But that's not the case, and that is where a guy named James comes in the Bible. You see, I don't want you to believe a lot of the misunderstandings about wisdom that are out there, and the lies about wisdom that are out there. These are, here's something that you will be led to believe even by some church people. They will tell you that if you're following Jesus and if you believe in God, then God will clearly show you exactly what to do every time. And your path will be very smooth and you will have no problems and you will experience immense amounts of blessing and there will be no resistance and no struggles. And if you encounter all of that, then it's your fault and that you have done something wrong. And that is why you're not getting blessed. There must be some sort of sin in your life or something. That's not the case, okay? God does not promise that following him will be easy and that your path will be smooth and that there will be no resistance. In fact, he promises the opposite of that. Resistance is all but guaranteed in the Bible, as is suffering. In fact, we just did a full series about suffering on Sunday mornings that you can go back and watch on this same YouTube channel, and you'll see that some suffering is to be expected, and some is to even be sought out. So don't believe the lies. Instead, believe this that James says. This is a promise from God to you. If any of you lacks wisdom, this is in James chapter 1, this is verse 5. If any of you lacks wisdom, let him ask God, who gives generously to all without reproach, and it will be given to him. If you ask wisdom, ask God and he will give it to you. He'll give it to anybody. Okay? Maybe our path will not always be abundantly clear. Maybe it won't always be smooth, but God promises to give wisdom to all who ask it of him. All, and that is a promise. And what better way to ask God for wisdom than to read his word and to spend time in prayer getting to know him as the giver of wisdom. So if you need wisdom and if you need help making decisions, the first place to go is straight to the source of wisdom, and that is God. And go to his word, which is the Bible. Okay, that's your first step. Okay, that will help you discern what is good and what is God, is to know God himself. How does this play out practically? Well, first, I'm serious. I'm serious about the Bible. Many of your issues and decisions have parallels in God's word. This is just practical, okay? God will actually speak to many of the issues that you are going through because a lot of your circumstances aren't new. Okay, you can find wisdom within the pages of the Bible, okay? And in fact, oftentimes God has spoken directly about what you should and should not do. But I've got another idea that goes beyond just the Bible itself. Not that the Bible is perfect. I don't want to say I'm going outside the Bible. This will go right along with the Bible. Okay? And I'm going to use the Bible to back it up. In Proverbs, Solomon says this: walk with the wise and become wise, for a companion of fools suffers harm. I know we've talked about this so much in youth group, and that's because it's so true and it's so awesome. It's so directly applicable to the age that you find yourself in, you watching this video. This applies like to everybody, but I mean, it can especially apply to you when you're spending a lot of your days with your peers and with your friends. If you have unwise companions, they will drag you with them. I hope you know that. So you want to surround yourself with those who have similar goals and similar plans and that have wisdom that they can offer you. Okay? Hop on our Zoom tonight and you're going to see some really, really wise people that are dedicated and that want to walk this life out with you. There will be some wise people. And here's the thing, we share this verse, walk with the wise and become wise, for a companion of fools suffers harm. We share this verse all the time at Crossroads Youth in regards to your peers, but it applies beyond your peers as well. How about mentors? Okay, I found myself, when I was still in college, I found myself in a situation where I planned on navigating romance by myself with nobody. I was not going to walk this out with anybody. It wasn't like I was hanging out with fools. I was just going to do it solo. And I found myself in a situation where I really desperately needed a mentor. Another example would be if I didn't discuss like finances when I was in college with my parents, I probably would not find myself in a stable position now. They had a lot of, and still have a lot of wisdom to offer me in that area of my life. So I urge you to seek out mentors who have wisdom in areas that you want to grow in. Perhaps you have athletic goals and there is a coach or an athlete or a friend that has a lot of wisdom to offer you. Seek them out and navigate that road with them. Maybe you have spiritual goals. Choose someone who is walking where you want to be and then join them in that walk. Pastor Craig Rochelle, he's from Life Church. That's his church. They're the ones that created like the Bible app and stuff. He shares a story about when he was in college and he was seeking out spiritual guidance, or like he wanted a mentor, like a spiritual and a actually relationship mentor. So that he found this like just awesome couple. They were married. And he was single at the time, and he knew that he wanted them to be spiritual and relational, like mentors in his life. So he bought the house next door to them. That's commitment, you know. He wanted to live next door to his mentors, and then one day he found himself dating the woman that would become his wife, and then he was going to them for, couples advice and couples counseling and stuff. He sought them out, and they became a major influence in his life. So surround yourself with people who are wise and then walk with them, and they will help you in your decision making as well. You can learn from their successes and their failures. Learning from both of those things would be an example of wisdom. And here's something to really keep in mind. It is going to be pretty hard to live a righteous life with no righteous friends. You need to surround yourself with the right friends who have those same goals as you. In fact, it's probably impossible to live a righteous life with no righteous friends. Your life is going to be full of decisions to be made, and sometimes many options are going to seem good, and many will seem beneficial. And in those moments, I want you to know that God is with you, and He is inviting you to make the decision. And He promises that He will guide you. He will give you wisdom and discernment for you to make the right choice. Yeah, you. And I hope you know I'm talking to you watching this video. It doesn't matter who you are. God promises to guide you, and He promises to give you wisdom and discernment. In Psalm chapter 32, verse 8, says this: I will instruct you, says the Lord, and guide you along the best pathway of your life. I will advise you, and I will watch your progress. That's pretty spectacular. God gives you the tools, and He trusts you to make the right decision. In fact, it's actually a sign of spiritual maturity for you to do so. In Hebrews, it says this: solid food is for those who are mature, who through training have the skill to recognize the difference between right and wrong. Or some translations say to discern between right and wrong. So with all of this, I encourage you to make decisions. I don't want you to find yourself in a moment where you would rather be indecisive. I encourage you to make the choice. And I trust you to make it because I trust God is guiding you. And God is advising you, and God has given you the wisdom to discern. You just have to use the tools that He's given you. Surround yourself with the right people. Get to know Him and His Word. Get to know the difference between right and wrong, because God trusts you. And if God trusts you, then I trust you. And before long, people will be seeking you out for wisdom and discernment as you live according to His Word and His teachings, and as you grow in wisdom. And before long, you might find yourself in a situation where someone's buying a house next to you because they're seeking you out for the wisdom that God has given you. So make decisions. As you decide which college to attend and which job to apply for, which friends to invite to your drive-through birthday party because you can't hold it in person right now, as you decide what movie to watch, know that there might not be a direct word from God that you hear, but know that wisdom might just break through and advise you, and know that that is from God as well. Oh, the places that you will go as you continue to seek out God's wisdom. So what does that look like this week? What kind of application are we wanting to do as a youth group? Well, I pray that you pray for God's wisdom. Ask Him to grant you discernment in your life. Earnestly seek that discernment and that wisdom in all that you do. This is a daily thing. It involves daily reading His Word, daily getting to know Him, daily spending time with the people that He has placed in your life intentionally. And sometimes it might look like cutting some things out because through that discernment, you realize it's not good for you. It might be a TV series that you're watching that it's just not wise to do. It might be a friend that you've allowed a little bit too much influence in your life. It might be a place that you go and hang out that you know you shouldn't. I don't know what it's going to look like for you. It could be different for everybody. But the more that you follow God and the more that you follow His teachings, the more that you'll recognize what is good and what is God. I'll talk to you guys tonight. I love you.